All right, welcome back to the Conquest Corner. On this particular episode, we are going to be talking about the worst regiments in each faction. I know, I think Bog Table did something that's similar, although I purposely didn't listen to theirs because I didn't want to color my thoughts on it at all. I know some other people have done highs and lows. We've done that for other systems as well. And I want to do that related to Conquest. Now, I didn't want to just talk about worst units or regiments overall, because then we might be looking in certain spots multiple times. I'm thinking, say, specifically, like, say, Dweghom, who we know are going to be end up getting that update, but they have a few units when you look at it just a little bit lackluster, or maybe a lot of bit lackluster. But I want to do it for each faction. Now, that is not to say that I think every faction has units that are actively bad. They don't. There's a few of these where we are, scraping and putting together to necessarily call something bad. But when you look at the faction overall, you might find that for each of them, there is something that is just underperforming for where they are currently. Now, when we talk about worst units, one, like I said, we're talking about regiments, not characters. So, say for instance, this is Dar. He is safe for the moment. We could talk through characters as well. I thought about doing that, although that gets potentially a lot trickier. Especially because some of that, for some of these options, it much more becomes what particular army list or play style you're going for. Where regiments, it's a little bit more easy to put together. So in order to come up with this particular list, the way I went through it is I tried to consider, the army as a whole, what the main play styles of the army are, the way, say, the unit doesn't fit into those play styles. Cost is a factor, of course. A unit can do well, but be just way too expensive for what it does. Although it's not the main determining factor, it really shouldn't be. If we think of, say, Foursquare drones, yeah, they're not great, but they're very cheap and they serve a purpose, and you can go through that sort of discussion. So if you aren't that great, you better be cheap, and even then you better have a good purpose. If you're expensive, you better have a very well-defined goal and focus of what you're going to do. Now, this, of course, is, a biased discussion and decision. I try to make it as equal as I can, but of course, it's my own personal beliefs. And in the comments, you can tell me your thoughts as well. I like listening and seeing those sorts of things. This is obviously, biased by what do I see? What do I hear people who play the different armies talk about? What do I hear them never talk about? What do I, when I look around and either talk to other people, watch battle reports, anything like that, what are the things that are there or are missing or is just, never discussed? As well as what I see and what I think as well. So for some of these, it's also dependent upon, okay, oh, this unit, I don't think they're that bad. They're fine. Okay, do you take them? If you play the army, do you ever take them? Do you use them? Or is it there's always something better? There's always a reason maybe not to, that kind of thing. And there could be some other bits in there as well. Luckily, unlike some other games, like say, certain types of, say, Warhammer Heresy or 40K, being sold out usually isn't the problem. So you should have access to it. So if you're not running it, there's probably a reason. All right, so let's get into this and let's see how it goes from here. I'm going to reasonably closely maybe follow this order, or maybe I will. Just I had it in a different order when I sat down and did this, but I can easily just go through this order. So we are going to start with 100 Kingdoms. And for mine, 100 Kingdoms, I feel was a little bit tough. I do feel they're better now. I think Theist units got a very big buff overall. I think they did the most for Theists. So it would be tough to pick, say, a unit that's Theist because it naturally has some extra synergy. So even if they're a little underperforming, well, maybe we just haven't seen that bit yet. Maybe we haven't quite figured them out yet. But what I chose for these guys, once it lets me scroll, I went with Longbowmen. So I wanted to discuss a little bit about why I picked the Longbowmen for 100 Kingdoms worst regiment. I do think they had some competition for the bottom, or overall the bottom. I think all the Cav units are pretty good. We can sit there and talk about how maybe, say, Ash and Dawn are not what they used to be. Yes. That's not necessarily a problem in the game, though. I don't necessarily know if you want them to be what they used to be, unless you're playing them and you really want to just like run around and crush your opponents. But like, I think all of those are fine. I think, most when we take a look at, say, like a militia. Well, militia are at least cheap. They're a cheap light that you don't have to take it, but you're not necessarily at a you know losing out or gaining too much by doing it. Like nothing too negative for that. Here's what my thoughts were related to bowmen. One, I feel they're a little bit expensive. I don't know exactly by how much. I don't. I know BattleTech does it where every single thing that you have is essentially been points costed in such a way so when you put something together, you have an exact value. I think for most war games that is not a great way to do it. I think you do have to waste certain things, but I think there's a lot more in it than just what do you have for that. But when I look at these, I do feel they're a bit costly for what they end up doing. They are only 3 shots each, 22. Yes, they have arcing fire, which is nice. Arcing fire in range 22 overall is nice. They do have armor piercing 1, which is nice. But very few shots. Advanced target training. So if they're veteran um, and they're in effective range, hey, you get an extra, so that can help them. But now you're having to take veteran. You're having to tack 10 more points onto them. So now you're sitting at 150. You're sitting at 150 for base, 10 shots. 10 shots on 2s, maybe 3s. They do have Cleave 1, which I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know if it's like a stakes in front of it sort of thing. But if they're getting into combat, that's kind of all over and done with because they're Clash 1 and all of that. So, okay. They're a bit expensive for the things they do. The profile isn't too bad, though, overall. A few reasons. Like I said, the rules are decent. They are, if you take a look, though, here's probably one of the main things going against them. They're only taken, at least as far as I'm aware, by noble lords. Because I went through and took a look for this because this to me matters. So when I look for longbowmen, when I take a look at the Emperor officer, anything like that, no, he takes a lot of the militia and mercenaries. Anyone on horse takes horse stuff. Obviously he doesn't because they are feudal. So when you look around, the only people who take it is the noble lord, mounted, or crusading. Both of them can take it. However, both of them only take them as restricted choices. Let's keep in mind, this is a light unit that is a restricted only choice. And that does mean that they're competing against either, say, Household Guard or Household Knights, which I like Household Knights personally. I just like horses in general. So even if it's not that great, I enjoy the horses and the sorts of options that they give you. But they're only taken by these 2 particular characters. They're only taken as restricted choices. I'm not going to want to put my crusading noble lord into the longbowman. So he's going into a different unit, and then I'm having to spend extra points on this. I'm now circumventing taking Household Knights, or I'm circumventing taking Household Guard. Right now, I think... Oh, sorry, he is a theist, so he can take them, although they are feudal themselves. I don't think you have to go feudal, so they don't necessarily get some of the same bonuses, since they don't necessarily have that particular type. Pulled out the rule there. If your warlord was feudal, you get some bonus. But otherwise, feudal regiments and characters also get the dynastic allies subfaction field roll. So if you do take them, if you're in a, say, a theist army, you will still get that. So you will still get your bonuses. I just don't think it's really enough. When we take a look at them, when we do a little bit of comparison, because the question is, okay, if you're not going to take them, what wouldn't you be taking instead? When I look at militia bowmen, I think I kind of like that a little bit more. Again, just for what they're going to be doing. You're looking at base, essentially same amount of shots. They're not quite as effective. I'm not so worried about the arcing fire. That is useful to be able to have someone behind them, but, all well and good. If they're arcing fire, they're getting the same numbers. The big thing is the lessened cost. They're only 25 extra points a stand, so that means I could be sitting at 5 stands for, less than the cost of these 3. Yes, armor piercing is nice, but if I'm just getting more shots, I'm going to get the things that I want. And here's a light choice that doesn't come out of restricted. I'm really iffy about light choices being restricted because now I'm having to make sure I can't just decide to take them. I have to make sure I have my other restricted accounted for and all of that. So I'm not necessarily saying I would take militia bowmen for sure, But if you're gonna not be great, your survivability is bad, you don't have any attacks, your clash is terrible, your resolve is awful, you have barely any wounds, I'd rather you be cheap. Because if this is a problem, if I'm an opponent, if this is a problem, the fact that good range with a bit of armor piercing, one, you're not going to have that many of them because of their price. You know, you want them to be vets to get that effective range. Now you're at 150. You want to get an extra stand in because I kind of like my shooting units in regiments of 4 or regiment sizes of 4. And now you're looking at what, 190? You're almost 200 points. If this is a concern for me, all I have to do is touch them and they're gone. And that's not necessarily going to be that hard to do. They're 22 inches away. But even for stands, we're looking at 13 shots. Even if you're on 3s, you're only getting 6 to 7 hits. If I'm 4 wounds, I'm maybe losing a stand. I touch you with 2 stands. I touch you with 1 stand, you're gone. You know, if I push hard, I can get in there, even with a single stand, you're down. And I don't need to spend a lot to necessarily do it. So if I'm going to have that issue, I think I'd rather go a little bit cheaper. And I said, part of this, I think, is really where they can be taken and the way they had to be taken. So for 100 Kingdoms, I'm going to choose the Longbowmen. All right, next faction in that particular order is Spires. So we're going to talk about them next. Now, for Spires, I was super back and forth on this. Just to kind of give thoughts. Oh, one thing I didn't mention before, it didn't really come up with the last bit. Other than Yoroni, because they're not technically out yet, I'm not going to look at units that are not out yet. That very well could be that they are the bad units. But if they're not out yet, they haven't really been, okay, they've been play tested, but they haven't necessarily been updated in the current environments. They're not necessarily the ones getting re-looked at. And what happens a lot of times when a unit is about to come out or does just come out, they get an update. So, hey, maybe Prowlers are actually really bad, but they're not out yet. So it doesn't really matter if they're good or not, because the rules could entirely change. We saw that with Dweghom. One unit went from a brute to a monster. So we're going to leave those off. I went very back and forth. You can have some, okay, people can make arguments for things that went well for them or poorly. Oh, my Siegebreaker never does anything. Yeah, but he can, and he's really good. Will he always do you a whole bunch? Maybe not. You can make arguments for Force-Grown Drones. Force-Grown Drones are cheap, terrible stats, but you know what? You take up a giant brick, you take a catalytic node, you put them with the Biomancer, they can really be a good tar pit. And they're cheap. You can stack out a lot of them for a very little bit. So they serve their purpose. Are they a great unit? Absolutely not. By you know, like the overall look. But when you look, or maybe by stat look is maybe the best way to put that, per point, per model look. But when you look at them holistically, they serve a very well-defined purpose, and they do their purpose well. I thought about giving it to the Abomination. I didn't, though. And the reason I couldn't give the Abomination, nice fast move with some good cleave, some flurry, all of that. The clash isn't that great. Yes, do Abominations get wrecked by people when they fight them? Sure. But you know what? It serves a really good purpose. The Abomination is not meant to be a through-the-middle frontline fighter. The Abomination is meant to harass from a side. Hey, you put, you know, this little 3 block in the back to go sit on this objective so you can sit there and score your 1 to 2 points from it automatically. No, I'm going to 20-inch move this turn and then move charge with this Abomination, or, you know, or just be able to charge depending on my positions into that unit, take them down. And then if I lose it, hey, I'm sitting on this objective. Maybe I go hit someone else in the back. Or if not, and you want to come and get me, come and get me. Turn around from your army, put something that matters into me. So I was back and forth, but I think the Abomination is bad if you send it as a fire and forget kind of thing. You kind of have to be tactical about it. You have to consider where you're going to put it, and is it at the advantage? Because it does well when it's at an advantage, but if not, yeah, it's not going to survive. So just think of giving it to that. I thought of giving it to a variety of things, but I was just looking at, I paused for a moment because I was looking at bound clones and all, because I keep going back and forth if I want to do it. But hey, you know, you're medium, you're at least scoring, you're not too bad in terms of points, you have good support. Again, you can kind of brick up pretty well. That's not the play style that I go with when I play my Spires. My Spires go much more Avatara in general, what, Leonin, centaurs, or brutes, or just base Avatara. I prefer the bigger lists personally. But I went back and forth on this, and I think I'm going to give it to Strix. I I don't actually dislike Strix overall. I dislike putting them together. I think there's some problems with the kit itself, and maybe that kind of colors it a little bit. But there's a few things related to this. Irregular, okay, so they're not really helping me out. 120 for my light, that's okay, maybe a little bit expensive for what they do. Well, hey, they fly with lethal demise, isn't that really good? Yes, I do find that useful. There's a few problems though. One, at the defense 1/evade 2, that means if I'm end up shooting into you, so if you're coming close, you're only 4 wounds a pop. After 4 wounds, you're now losing a lot of what punch you had in that lethal demise, because with 4 attacks on 2s, you weren't necessarily punching me. You're looking to, what you're really looking for is to, move charge to get onto someone who wants to do something, and now you're making them fight you, which is an important thing, or get a couple attacks into them, and then they have to kind of fight you back. I think some of the problems I have with them is, like I said, one, that bad defense type stats means that if I'm going to shoot them at all, you are going to be losing units really, or stands really, really fast. Not everyone has it, but a lot of people have 16 to maybe 20 some inch shots. If I let you push forward, or if I'm careful about when I move, I can get at least 1 round of bow shots on it, even if I only hit you with, 6 dice. There's still actually a really good chance that you're going to lose a stand. So you're going to lose them pretty fast. The other big thing is that they're only resolve 1. Keep in mind, lethal demise, to pull this up, field defense roll. It doesn't work on resolve, which means that if I say you're trying to get in my way and stop me, well, I'm not going to inspire. I'm just going to swing, because my goal is to do half your wounds to you, or maybe 1/2. Because if I can do that, there's a very good chance that based off your resolve, you just get destroyed. If I do 7 wounds to you after your 3 stand unit, you're most likely gone. And I'm only having to take, say, 7 back. And in reality, you probably didn't come in there with 7. And you're going to do 7 non-resolving wounds to me for 120 points. You may be disrupted half of my 1 activation, which is not too big of a disruption. Now, I did this the other day with some Origami Warriors into an into an Iron Drake or whatever like that. And yeah, they only went in there with the goal, the express goal of getting destroyed and doing something for me, putting some wounds on you. And hey, you know what? That worked well. But, for this price, I don't think it's going to. And I don't like it enough for what it does. I do think Fly is good, but, if I see this unit across the board, if I'm worried about that hit to the back, because you're going to jump over me and hit the unit I don't want, I just won't leave you space to do that. They're going to be on early. They're going to be telegraphed early. And I either can avoid it, or I'm just going to take a little bit of damage. Not the end of the world. Woe is the day if I actually get to hit them with magic. Because then they're almost going to take all the damage I give with a 2, and they're absolutely going to take almost all of the resolve I give. So I think they are a gimmick, but I think they're an expensive gimmick. I think they are weighting lethal demise very high, but if you don't have a good way to get in there necessarily, I don't find it as useful. So the move 10 with Fly, yeah, you can get there, but I don't think it's going to work out. And this is a unit I don't see people take. I don't see it talked about. I don't see it used. Now, if you're using them and they're working great, hey, share that below. I'd love to hear about that, especially for any of this. Or if there's another unit here, like, I don't know how you didn't pick these guys. Here's how they're bad. I will say I do try to remove as best I can the idea of, oh, I played it or played against it and it did great, bad. because small data points don't really tell us anything. So I do try to avoid that. Like, I've played games where my marksman clones have done nothing. That doesn't make them bad. Marksman clones are very, very good. But yeah, things are going to underperform. One good game with Strix doesn't mean Strix are great. Neither does one bad. I just don't think they're going to punch for what they want. That was the other thing, actually. I just checked because I couldn't remember who actually takes Strix. Just the Ferromancer. It's the only one. Biomancer, I'm kind of surprised actually doesn't, but no, it's just the Ferromancer. One, I personally just see more Biomancer. I don't see nearly as many Ferromancers, but I'd have to take it. You'd have to take them as a mainstay, which means now you have to take at least one more unit because your character's not going in there. So you're looking at attacks. There's something to be said for a unit that is pretty garbagey but easy to get. Because then you could just run it. There's nothing wrong with running some chaff or running some garbage or just, hey, pure activations and all. But now I must take a Firemancer. I must take at least a unit. And if I'm taking, say, 4-square drones, I'm not taking a little 3-pack. Might as well just spend the extra points and not even throw this back on the board. So now I'm potentially taking a lot. So if you're not taking him, you're not really getting it. If you are taking him, it's not maybe as bad as a mainstay for that, but a 4-square drone for him, maybe some onslaughts because I want to open up for desolations or brutes or abominations. So I don't know. That's me. I don't feel super great about that particular selection, but I do think it's the one that I'm least currently impressed by. All right, on to the Dweghom. Now, for the Dweghom, at the end of the day, what we're going to say here is honestly probably a little bit unfair. And the reason it's unfair is because we know they're getting an update. So whatever I say now absolutely could change, and I hope it does. In my most recent tournament, I actually had phase 2 shooting Dweg lists. I actually just put out the battle reports of the third game. I might do the other ones. I'm not sure. The third one I thought had the most interest from a picture perspective because it was only picture form. I do have another tournament later this month, March, and I plan on taking more pictures there through like parts of turns and all to be able to discuss. So we'll see. Although that one I'm probably bringing my old Dominion because I don't want to bring the same thing twice. That bores me. So when we look at Dweg, maybe whatever I say, maybe another month or so, maybe it'll be entirely different. You know what? That's great if that's the case. So let's talk about the pick for this. Again, this is one where I think there's a lot of choices. It is not unknown that Dweg have some problems right now. I don't think it's pure doom and gloom, but I do think they have some issues. When you think about their builds, it's a little bit, do you go the pure magic sort of route, which I do think has magic/shooting. I think that has some really good strength. Or do you go more Ardent Karawa, Holray kind of pure combat sort of thing? I think there's some pushes for that. I think you have some great units when you're looking at, say, Fireforge or Flame Berserkers. I think both of them do their jobs really, really good. Dragon Slayers are not nearly as scary as they used to be, but I'm not going to give worse to anyone who's a Cleave 3 because, yeah, you get them into the right spot, they're going to take down their target, and at that price, if they can take down a giant monster, they can make up for what they need. Same thing when we look at, say, Whole Ballista. Do they do tons? Not necessarily, but hey, they're a nice shooting unit, they're light, they fit all those sorts of things. I went back and forth, and what I decided to go with here, where are they? Why am I not seeing them? There they are, Wardens. I decided to give it to Wardens. And I did go back and forth for quite a while on this. I was also looking at, say, like Hold Thanes, who are sitting at the same sort of points cost. I don't think points by V points is the best way to make comparisons, but I think it's at least a way to kind of make some considerations. Or, I said the Hold Thanes or maybe even Hold Warriors. I think Hold Warriors have a good options because they are a nice, reasonably cheap mainstay that if you just want to be able to get some of the bigger things, hey, I don't have to pay too much of a tax on that. When we talk about taking them, actually, in particular, only the Ardent Karawa takes them. So that's the only spot you're taking Wardens. And personally, I like Whole Ballista, Flame Berserkers, and Magma Forged more. So I kind of want most of the, do I like Magma Forged more? More than that, probably, yeah. I kind of like, or even just hold warriors. I like the other options that you can take. So you might not even take an Ardent Karawa. Not that he's bad, but you don't necessarily have to take one. Um, Lists I've been playing against a lot more have been running more like sorcerers or maybe just a whole array for the cheapness. And if you do end up taking him, is Warden's the unit that you actually want? Not necessarily. So let's talk about these guys. Why I put them here. So a few reasons for these in particular. One, they'd have good attacks with cleave, but it's not something that this army doesn't have. When you look at a lot of this, you have a lot of various shots. When we look at Fireforge are what, AP2. So you got good armor piercing 2 here. Your Hold Ballista, armor piercing 1. So I can armor pierce you at range. We have Dragon Slayers with AP3. We have some other units with some AP as well. Whole Warriors don't have any of it. They particularly don't, but hey, notice they have Vanguard. They got a little extra movement. Your Magma Forged, hey, Cleave 2. They have some extra Aura Death. You do have Cleave 1, but Cleave is not something you're lacking in this army. You have ways to get to your Cleave if you want. Good amount of attacks. They have the very normal-ish stat line around defense 3, around resolve 4, 1 extra wound, so sitting on the 5 wounds, 1 extra than human stat line, so like 5 wounds, 5 to slash with these guys are 6 attacks, but that's not an atypical stat line sitting on 3s here. So the Cleave one, I'm not super impressed with. Devout, I think might actually be more of a detriment for them. The Dweg lists that I'm currently seeing are running much more offensive magic. If you are taking Ardent Karawa, which is the only way you're taking these guys, yes, there is some spells that you can buff with them, but you're probably more likely to actually be either putting on other units, or in general, you are actually casting your magic out with your Tempered Sorcerers and things like that. Which means that Devout could actually work against you, because if I can cast onto the unit, for anyone who doesn't realize, when you're target of a pre-spell action, 1 failed die is converted to a success. It doesn't say friend or foe. So if I'm casting on you, I now only need 1 success. Let's assume it's not a scaling spell. 1 success because you're already going to convert 1 for me. So the Devout isn't necessarily helping them. Fearless is nice with a resolve of 4, but I'd rather you be better defense and less resolve in general, because I'd rather stop more and then have less than let more through. Because Fearless, okay, they're not taking the minuses, but on 4s, okay, I'm still going to fail a third of those results. But defense 3, I'm failing at least without you having any cleave or armor piercing. I'm failing half of them. That's going to feel worse, I think, overall. Again, maybe if something had like a huge terrifying, that's another thing. But just in general, Fearless is nice, but if I have, and they have no evade. So I happen to have, I mean, I think one of the last times I went against these guys, I had a Cleave 3 unit. So they just took all that damage to the face, and then, a good amount through resolve. Not tons, but an amount. But even then, if I can just lower you even by 1, now you're only passing 1/3 of the defenses. If I want to take these guys down, if I throw the right unit at them, I don't care that you're Fearless and all those extra bits. I feel for their points, you need to get into someone. I need to get into you before you hit me, because I need my 6 attacks with my at the moment inspired Clash 4 with my cleave and all of that, which means I have to take Standard Bearer, which I have to pay for. So these guys are now worth 200 points. And I think actually you can make an argument that they would no longer be the bottom if the Standard Bearer was included. I think that alone could help. Do I think it's enough? Probably no, but at least now I can say, hey, a little bit fast for a Dweg. I get to reroll those charges. I get that extra 1 inch on if I do 2 moves. So that first turn I'm coming, with the turn that I'm coming on, the first turn that I'm on, not the actual first turn of the game. Okay, now I'm 13 inches up, a 6 with the reroll. Hey, now I can actually start getting into people. That loss of that little bit, or having to pay the extra, just does a little bit too much for them. So that's the reason I put them. Also notice like that defense 3, no hardened. So any little bit of cleave, you are lowering those stats. You are taking a good bit of wounds. You're only 5 each, so you're only 15 wounds. That's not so many. So I think there was a couple different options for them, but for where they can be taken, for what they do, for what they are, I think that's reasonably fair. Like I said, you look at, say, like Hold Warriors or Hold Things are maybe a good comparison. Same amount of cleave, but these guys are on 3 with shields and hardened. So it's essentially that reverse. I'm probably going to take less wounds, which means resolve matters a bit less. If I save a good many more wounds, you could be cleave 1. These guys will still be on 40s. These guys are on 2s. I'm literally taking twice as much damage. I don't care about the difference in resolve than if I'm taking twice as much damage, and they get their standard for free. They can take the officers. Let's say we don't even worry about the officers. So technically a tiny bit slower, are less attacks, but more survivable if that's what you want. But instead, if what you're buying them for is punch, there's other units that punch better. So they don't defend as well as you want. They don't punch as well as you want. They're only taken with one character, and I think he's got better options. So I'm going to give it to the Wardens. All right. Let's take a look at Nords. And this one took me the longest because honestly, I don't dislike anything that they have. Realistically, I don't. Now, when we talk about worst or anything like that, that doesn't mean a unit won't underperform for you. It does. I have one-shot Ice Jotnars before. I have one-shot Sea Jotnars. Those sort of things happen. You know, my crazy monster goes into your crazy monster. Who knows what's going to happen? That kind of stuff. So will stuff underperform in the game? Sure. You'll have underperformance. In the past, before updates, I would have probably given it to Mountain Jotnar. But you know what? He's cleaved too. He's got his hardened. He's terrified. I know he can get tenacious. I've seen him have that. I forget exactly why. But hey, you know what? He does his job. So we could take a look at other stalkers, but you know what? They got good shots. They're flanked. They're opportunists. They fit their role. You don't have good defense, but hey, guess what? You don't have good defense in this army. You know, you are meant to get up into someone's face, and the reason they can't hurt you is because they're getting taken out. Now, I know a lot of people don't necessarily like Bow Chosen. I've heard tons of people say all kinds of bad stuff about Bow Chosen. I don't think Bow Chosen are bad. They're at shortish range, but light unit, so they're out on the board early. I can get them into a good position. 14 isn't that bad, but with 5 shots, so in a 3-pack, you're looking at 16 shots. Precise shot, so if you happen to roll a 1, they get no defense. I have absolutely had that light up my units that don't have good evade. Now, if your opponents tend to have evade, then that doesn't matter. Or decent evade, or the fighting units where defense and evades are the same. Means none of that matters. That 1 extra wound, I've absolutely had that keep these guys around. They are actually Clash 3, so they might not have a lot of special rules in terms of close combat, but at Clash of 3, that actually makes them respectable. They will cause wounds to you, because 4 attacks on that. They're base volley 3, so when they aim, they're on 4s. With that in the 1s means you're hitting, 2/3 of your shots, and 1/6 overall of the dice you're rolling, they don't get defense against. I like Bow Chosen. I'm not saying to take like a 5-pack of them, but I think for 3-packs, I like Bow Chosen. I said that the problem is I like everything. But I wasn't going to skip not giving this to someone. So I had to give it to someone. And honestly, I'm back and forth between Fenrir and Ugars. Now, let me be very clear about this. Neither unit is bad. I don't dislike either of these units. I don't dislike anything. The only reason I would probably give it to the Fenrir Beast Pack is, one, when I look at Ugars, I just like them. If I really don't know what to give, if I like you. Fearless and Oblivious helps on that 3. They do have no evade, so that really does hurt them. If you have any cleave, they're probably going to go down, so I don't know. Maybe them. I'm really back and forth if I want to give them or not, or give them the Fenrir. The only reason for the Fenrir part is because Gold Tier now exist, and I think Gold Tier do the Fenrir job better. They're both medium. They're just about as fast as each other. These guys do clash better. They're a little bit more expensive, but they do hit better. They have 1 less attack, but they have more wounds. They have better resolve and base defense. Not necessarily evade, but they have better on the other spot. Full information is nice. I really do like that. That really does help these guys be able to turn a regular with loose formation. Okay, so you're not shooting them as well. They're not helping your lines at all. Opportunists, so they want to get the flank, but hey, with fluid formation, they got good shots at that. Vanguard 4, so they're very far up the board. However, I think werewolves do that job too. Just rush up the board and see what you do. So when we compare it to that sort of task, I think werewolves can do that. They don't have the Vanguard, but they have the 7 move. They can regen, they can come back, all of that. But the big thing is, I think the gold tier are really good. They have impacts with brutal impact. They're also regular. They're line breaker. They have trample as well. They got unstoppable. These guys don't have the unstoppable. That also hurts them, I think, a little bit. So I probably, I don't know. In the current moment, I might give it to the Fenrir just because I think gold tier are better. Like everything that maybe the reason why you took your Fenrir, I might now just swap those to the gold tier and I won't be concerned. Yes, I will lose certain bits, but I also gain some other bits. Whereas before these guys need to get to a flank and they need a not hardy target, a moderate target with the things that they have. The number of attacks, they can get through, and if they're in your flank, if you had like shields and all, you lose that. But they need a reasonable target. These guys just kind of take whatever. They don't have to get to the side. Linebreaker means they also don't care about your shields, or in this case, your bastion, because the side bastion still would have. So they're essentially getting almost that side bonus. They get a little bit of trample at the end. They get some impact going in. So they have multiple instances to do that damage to you. Where the Beast Pack, the Fenrir Beast Pack, really doesn't. I could see, though, if someone wanted to give it to Ugars. Like I said, the biggest problem with them is defense 2, no evade. So if I have some cleave, you're just taking those wounds. They're only 5 wounds each. They are just 3 attacks with that cleave 2. So cleave 2 is really good. The reason I might keep them in is if you're not running to run a heavy monster list, then cleave 2 is something that you're sort of lacking. High level cleave, your monsters do that. But if you're not running the big boys, here's your way to get that. And the Fearless with Oblivious at least means that Resolve 3 is pretty stable for them. The big thing is avoid people who cleave, because if they do, you're just taking those hits. So I think I'm going to give it to the Fenrir. Although I'm back and forth, I could see it being the Ugars, but you know what? For the moment, I'll give it to the Fenrir because I think there's another unit that just does their job. I don't know who exactly does. The Ugars' job, maybe Bearsarks. Yeah. Although Vanguard 4, so a little bit faster and all, but that could be another thing. And also, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll give it to Ugar because they don't have a standard. So they're wanting to charge on their 6, but they don't have any bonuses to get anything like that. They do have some impact. Toss up. Absolute toss up. They're both great. I think they're both really, really good. But you know what? I don't when we used to be able to record more with Dan Steve, I didn't allow them to sit on the fence. Or I didn't let Dan sit on the fence. So you know what? I won't sit on the fence either. I'll give it to Ugars. Yeah. Fenrir Beast Pack, I do think they're outclassed by the gold tier, but I could see some purpose, even movement and stuff like that. These guys are probably just lacking a little bit compared to what you have because you do have Bearsarks to get the cleave that you need. So if that's sort of their purpose. So, you know what? I'll give it to the Ugars. Again, I like them though. I like everything here. I think they're all just fine. If you have a particular bad unit for this faction, let me know because I don't see one. Now, hopefully that shows you at least how back and forth I was for the Nords because I spent most of the time talking about the unit that I didn't say was the worst. Like I said, I think I like them all, but now the more I do think about it, the more I feel that Ugars probably have the best odds at underperforming in terms of their units. All right, that goes to Wadhrun. All right, so for Wadhrun, my pick here I don't think is that surprising. Again, we're not looking at characters. I don't think my pick is that surprising because I know some Wadhrun players, listen to Wadhrun people talk. I've heard some rumblings on their Discord. I do try to avoid the Discord. I'll look at it for rules and stuff like that. but I do try to avoid it otherwise. For stuff like this, because one, whenever you get a collection of people together, they're going to talk about what is good and bad. And that is the same way mine is, of course. But it's always going to be colored by the things that they saw and that happened, and the games that they've played, or their local meta and all, or just things that they don't like and, stamp into the ground and say, hey, no, 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 it's bad. No, none of that is kind of good. So I avoided those parts of discussion. I'll look through other bits, but I do try to avoid those particular pieces. Um, when I was going through this, though, I found that overall there is a pretty popular choice here, and that is Chosen of Death. What I've heard, and I feel the same way, but what I feel and what I've seen is a lot of people say, man, I wish Chosen of Death felt better because they're great models. I absolutely do think they're great models. I'm personally not big into Wadhrun. I don't mind the dinosaurs. If I did this, I would do a bunch of dinosaurs. I don't necessarily know if there's other things I'd want to do first, other factions or other stuff like that. But a lot of the other ones, it's just, I don't know. I like my orcs a little more 40k like than this personally. Love dinosaurs, but my orcs a little bit more 40k. But I think the big thing with this is you just compared to the other units, compared to the other big costers, you just don't get enough. Yeah, they don't quite feel like they get enough done for you. Flawless strikes, so they're on 3s, technically on 4s. Flare means you reroll your misses, but flawless strikes, looking for those 1s is a bit unreliable. And the key is, when we were talking a moment ago about it for Bow Chosen, we're talking about this, shooting unit, and we're talking about, okay, do they meet their purpose? When you're talking about shooting itself is always less reliable. So yeah, you need 1s and shots to remove the armor. Yes, not always very reliable, but it'll spike and you'll get some bits. Here also not reliable, but this is what they do. Shooting units by design are not as strong or shouldn't be as strong, and that should be a game-wide thing. But when I look at this unit, the problem is it just doesn't feel like they do enough. They can get an extra evasion when they do chant. So if it's off a Call to Death, so they only do Call to Death, and if they chant the battle cry, extra evasion. Okay, so if you get the right timing, they have good evasion, but otherwise they're only on 2s. Resolve a 3, not so great. Loose formation, so a little bit harder to shoot into. They are only the 5 wounds. Essentially, the problem with this is you're hunting for those flawless strikes, but this game doesn't let you reroll anything you want. You have to only reroll fails, because that's failed to hit rolls. If you let me reroll anything I wanted, a la Song of Ice and Fire, now flawless strikes, now this unit gets a little more interesting, because, well, if I'm inspired, I'm going to hit on 4s. I'm maybe just, you have super good defense, but your evade is really bad. I'm just going to reroll everything that's not a 1. Because on that second go around, most of what I rerolled is going to hit. Not all of it, but most of it. And I'll try to spike you out with 1s. I think the problem is it doesn't feel like they do enough. The other key is that the Scion of Conquest is the only one who takes them. And just to make sure, I checked as well, because I didn't want to be wrong when I said this. The Scion Conquest is the only one who takes the Chosen anyway. But, 1, they're restricted. So, I mean, if you're taking the Scion Conquest, you have to take some sort of mainstay. But, 1, is a spot you could take a Drum Beast. If you happen to have one, please take it. You spent a lot of money on it. But if you do want, I forgot to do this before, but if you do want to save some money, we do have a discount code, Train Kickers. It's in the show notes. Normally I said that was the beginning, and I mentioned again at the end. Completely forgot to. That's fine. It's been a little bit since I've actually gotten a chance to sit down and record one of these. But you got some of your other Chosen. Now, War, we don't exactly know yet. We have to wait for that, as well as Famine. But when we look at the previews, I know, again, when they come out, who knows? But currently, I just feel like you have to take the Scion. I'm happy with my choice of Chosen of Conquest. So if I'm taking those guys, I'm overall, I'm pretty happy with that. When I look at this, okay, a little bit hardier in general. If you have some cleave, maybe not, but they're hardier in general. They get some impact. They get a Nice bonus. They get a third activation. So that's a much better bonus than a little bit more defense. This means I'm wanting to take these guys. This is probably where I'm putting that sign of Conquest. If I'm taking them, there's already an expensive unit. Am I going to necessarily be taking these as well? Probably not. Maybe they're a little bit better. And we're still waiting for the other two. When we see the other two, maybe this thought will change. But currently, I'd rather just take my chosen a Conquest. Maybe Blooded or Braves if I'm trying to fill out this slot a bit. I got Drum Beast, so I'm going to take that. Otherwise, I guess I'm taking Famine just because I don't have the other ones yet. But when I think about filling out this list, I have Thunder Riders I'm looking at. I have probably, at least one Hunting Pack. Sorry, not Hunting Pack. I might take those as well. Raptor Riders. I'm probably taking 1 to 2 Raptor Riders. Quaddles are amazing. I think they are not a bad unit. They have the problem that where they sit in this particular army, they don't give you quite enough compared to what other things will do. If they had a little bit extra, then sure. But further points cost, which is probably pretty close to appropriate. I'm not saying drop a ton of points because then I think you just see them all over the place. But your other choices, you're probably already filling up your list with other things. And it's probably just the fact that they get squeezed out. We play this game mostly at 2K. If I had 2,500 points, maybe then I'd take a Chosen a Death unit. But right now, I just don't think I do. And I do feel that overall, that's what I've seen. That's a lot of the discussion that I've both heard from people at my local store and some other spots as well, that they don't feel like they quite get the job done. So you might be overall the least inspiring unit in your army, not because you're necessarily bad, but just because you don't get enough. All right, on to Old Dominion. So this is one of the main factions that I play, and I will tell you, I went back and forth. I think most of Old Dominion is pretty good, personally. Um, I mean, you can make arguments of do you like Bone Golems more, but Kefali? Personally, I like Kefali more. I just also like more the way that I painted them. Doesn't mean either of them bad. Neither of them is actually bad. They kind of serve different purposes, and they're taken by different people. So, okay, how you fit them in. The 2 Centaurs, yeah, I do think, the shooting might be done better by the Caratids, but I think there's a spot for it. I think, again, if you're taking spots where you couldn't take Caratids, I don't think you're going to feel bad for taking Caracats. What I wanted to do, I wanted to give it to Mori. The reason I wanted to give it to Mori is because, and maybe this is my own bias. Originally I did. I wrote it up for them. And then I thought about it more and more. I wanted to give it to Mori because, one, they really don't get going until they get their memories of old. So when they start out, they're really trying to probably avoid combat. But that's not hard to do. You don't have to rush across the board. You can stay back. You can get close to getting that. One big thing they actually have now is that, where is it? Their priest number is that the X of the regiment only counts towards enemy interference. No. Yeah, there it is. Sorry. Its priest level is 1 per stand. That used to not be the case. They actually didn't have a level. If you go far back enough, they were priests, but they didn't have a number. You actually had to essentially go through memories to get it, where you get the +1, which means they never got their spells. Translocation is nice, but it's only an 8-inch move. I could never get it to work the way I wanted personally in a useful way. And Immolation, the extra Aura of Death is nice. Probably maybe nicer now with the way the numbers are. But essentially, I never got their spells. I never felt like they did too much. And they're really not doing a lot until you get to that cleave. I wanted to give it to them, and I wrote it up for them. But then I thought about it more and more, and it probably has to be Assassins. And even then, I don't necessarily feel great about it. These guys do have a leader. They do have more attacks. They do have the Vanguard, so they're going to get up further. Acolytes, that just means that their command stand can actually get you power. They have the Cleave of 1, which is good. They have the Deadly Blades, so when someone rolls it and fails, it'll be 2 wounds. I think that they're less survivable because they have the same evade, but these guys actually do resolve. They don't naturally give you dark power except for the leader. They're both very, very expensive. See, the more I talk, I go back and forth on which one. I think it sort of depends on what your goal for them is. If your goal is hit someone early and damage them, that is either a problem, then assassins probably do the better job because they have the extra vanguard, so they're going to be closer, and they have the cleave with the deadly blades. So if you happen to roll bad and they have more attacks, if you happen to roll bad, they're going to do more to you. I would say late game, and Mori are also devout, so that helps for their spells because their spells are only cast on them. Mori, if you can wait a little bit later in the game, probably do get a little bit better. I was going to give it to assassins, but now no. I wanted to give it to Mori, and the more that I talk about it, I do think that I still might give it to them. When I think of, now maybe this is me, when I think of the purposes that I personally need in these armies, I've started to realize the more that I play is I want some sort of light unit that's going to go and cause a problem. They don't have to survive out. I'm okay with that. They're a light unit. Usually I pay less points, but if all they can do is get me a reinforcement line and cause a disruption, get into the opponent, cause some problems, then I'm okay with that. And I think assassins actually might do that job better. I said they're faster, so they're going to get me a better reinforcement line. I did this when I talked about movement. A reinforcement line of 12 is effectively almost no reinforcement line unless you have a shooting unit that you want to be on the side. Otherwise, if you're, say, 6 move, you're going to get further. Let's say you're 3 wide. You are going to be further up walking in from the back than coming in from the flank if you only move 12. Now, if your reinforcement line is more of, the 15 to 16 range, like assassins can get you, then you are much more likely to actually be able to get distance when you come in the side. These guys are 16 up the board. They can move again. Yes, if they get hit, you're going to take tons and tons of damage. But honestly, with Mori, you're taking most of it as well. Like, yeah, these guys do have that resolve, so they take a little bit more. But Mori, we're going to take quite a bit as well. They had the same amount of wounds. So you weren't necessarily saving that much more. You are more survivable, but I don't know if that does enough. Like I said, the problem with Mori is, am I getting enough out early game with them? Probably not. Because a little 3-pack, I do need just 1 success on those spells. I guess you can get in there and get Aura Death as number of successes. Maybe you'll beat up to Aura Death, say 7 for a little 3-pack. But later in the game, they're better. But I want a disruption unit. And looking at it, these guys are probably the better disruptors. And with that Cleave 1 and Deadly Blades, they have a shot at really punching up their weight class. So I think they have more of the upside. It's great. Actually, they have more of the upside and the downside. They are more likely, I would say overall, to have problems than Mori will because of that resolve. However, their upside, I think, is probably better. I like them more for that. If I want Ghosts, I take Cares, personally. I like Cares more than Mori. I probably like them more than Assassins as well. But if I'm going to take one of these two, actually, you know what? I'm going to take Assassins, so I'm going to say it's Mori. I think if these guys were either maybe a little bit cheaper, or maybe if I just built different lists where I would take them, because actually both of these guys are taking the same sort of spots, so actually can be taken by Archimand, right? So can take it there. Otherwise, the Assassins, you're just coming out of the Hierodeacon, but the Hierodeacon probably, I take one, but if you're taking them, Cultists, maybe then just because they're their stricter choice there. But you know what? I'm going to give it to Mori. And maybe this is just because also I like the Assassin models more. I'm trying to make it not arbitrary reasons, but I don't feel super great about this particular choice, honestly. But I think I'll give it to these guys because I think for when I want this unit, I think they don't offer as much. I think later in the game, when you're at tier 2, when you got a little bit more priest, when you can maybe the translocation or immolation, the fact that it takes one of your actions, but once you're stuck in, you could swing and then immolate. But I think they want to wait for a while to get those bonuses. And my light units, most of them, I want them affecting the game early. That's why I take them. If I don't want the bonus of what a light is, I'm not going to spend 180 points on them. I'll spend it on, carrot kicks or Primi. So that way I can rush up. I'll spend a little bit more. I'll get a Canaphor or a Carotid unit. I'll spend a little bit more. I'll get a unit Cataphracti, which are going to do me a whole lot of good. So yeah, I'm going to give it to Mori. And so maybe part of that is colored by my thoughts on it, but they're the ones that I'm least excited about personally right now, which is weird because I have like 6 stands of them upstairs. All right, moving right along, we are on to city-states. Now, I feel like when we get into this one, I'm going to have to preface this highly. Oh, and when I look at characters, if you are like the Promethean, since that is a character, I'm not putting that in consideration. Because if you can be taken as a character in one way or the other, I don't look at it. All right, I will admit city-states is the one I felt the least confident with. Steve plays them, so I played against them. I feel it's a faction I don't necessarily have a great grasp on. So hopefully whatever I say here isn't going to be like just the worst thing ever personally. Maybe it will be. And if it is, let me know. Let me know nicely, please. But do let me know. So I went back again. Another one we're going back and forth. I know some people say the Satori, but okay, they're a one-trick pony that's expensive, but I think it's a really, really good trick. Do they punch down? Yes. Are they technically worth 200 points based off of stats? Absolutely not. They're 200 points, though, because they just show up on the side. And can you counter it? Of course you can. For anyone who's not as familiar with them, they can enter from any board edge, excluding your opponent's reinforcement edge. So, and they don't care about that, about the enemy's reinforcement line. Can't put any characters in there. You wouldn't want to anyway. But, can you ignore or can you try to shut down their thing? Yes. But move 6 with Vanguard 6 that turn they're coming in. I can move 18 inches from any spot on the board except your back edge, which means that I can show up just about anywhere, which means if you are watching this, you have to be really careful where you put yourself. Okay, I need units along the edge facing towards the outside. Okay, well, maybe now I'm facing enough where someone can rush into the middle and hit me from the sides. That are now pointed more up. Or do I just, I won't put anyone near that edge. Well, they're moving 18 inches. They're pretty far over. You're now looking at a very far distance. So are you just going to push to the centers? Like I said, are they worth 200 points based off of this? What you see? No. But I think that trick is a very good trick. So I'm not giving it to them. Here's who I'm giving it to. And let me say the full thing before you tell me that I'm wrong. I am going to give this to Minotaur Hospice. Specifically, though, I'm giving it to the regiment of them, not the auxiliary. I think it's an auxiliary that they give you something that the units that have them are lacking. So when I take a look at, hoplites, okay, here's your stat line, but look at hoplites. Okay, hey, for that points, you're looking at, 40 on that. 50 points right there. That when you're taking this, you know what? Hey, that's giving them, a defensive guy because, they have their shields and stuff like that. Hey, he's giving them some cleave. He's got some impact and all that. He's giving them something that the unit necessarily doesn't have. And it's a bigger wound soak because he's 6 wounds. So if anything else, he's 10 more points to hold a lot more wounds for you. So he's serving a good purpose there. I think the unit as just hospice, that I think is what I'm least impressed by. Now, the reason why I'm least impressed by them, I think they're outshined as a unit. I think if my goal is the big hard-hitting unit, for about the same, I could take Thyrines. For around the same, I can take Inquisitors, which are getting more attacks. Defenses are a bit better on these guys as well. They're going to get flurry with that cleave 1. These guys are on that cleave 1. Yes, they have impact They have more impact. They don't have the brutal, but they do have more impact. Okay, not fearsome, but that's fine. Sorry, about the same, because these guys have shields as well. My apologies. So a little bit better on the Inquisitors. I think Inquisitors are a little bit weird, but I think you have another unit that can do about what they do. I think if you really want punch, you have Thyrings that you could take for the punch. However, I think when I just look at them for this arm action, and they have Vanguard as well. Do I actually want to? I don't know. Actually, no, I still think I'm going to give it to the Hospice. The reason why I was going back and forth between these two. Again, I had to think about the purpose of the unit as well. Where am I using it? I think Hospice as auxiliary are great. They're a little easier to take. They show up a little bit more than, say, the Inquisitors. But if the goal of this unit is to be able to have a decent amount of stick with a decent amount of punch, which is about where Minotaur Hospice are. They're not super defensive because they're sitting effectively on 3s and 3s, although one of that comes from a shield. So you hit me in the side, you negate that. They have a bit of impact with a little bit of brutal. They have some cleave as well. The fearsome is fine. I don't honestly care about that one way or the other. But when I look at the Inquisitors, they're generally going to be hitting on one less, but they have more attacks and flurry. So in overall, they're going to get more hits. They have the same amount of cleave. They importantly have the unstoppable. They're faster, although the Hospice have Vanguard. But in general, they're faster. And that means with Unstoppable, you're more likely to make those longer charges. I've played against Hospice many times before where you roll for that charge, you just don't get the distance. I mean, honestly, if you just gave them Unstoppable, I think they would shoot back up. For me personally, I think maybe that's the big thing that they're lacking. So when I'm looking at survivability, Inquisitors are a little bit better. When I'm looking at punch, Inquisitors are probably still a little bit better on average. You know, again, if you're only just say pure average levels of dice personally. So I think I'll still give it to these guys. And again, I don't think in this particular case they're a bad choice. And maybe this is just me not being as familiar. I think Companion Cavalry have a good purpose because you want those fast type moving cav. We know the monsters are pretty good, the big monsters. Chariots, they had to tone down because chariots are super good. I think Selene and we already talked to Satari. I think they serve their purpose as well. I think Thorkidis have a good purpose. I think a lot of these other pieces fit the things. I mean, maybe technically I give it to the Mechanist if I could give it to a character, but I'm not giving it to characters. So I do think I'm going to give it to Hospice. Again, as an auxiliary, I think they're great, but if you're going to take it as a regiment, I think I just like some of these other choices more. I don't think they give you the punch and the survivability better than what some other things do. And I don't think they're bad if you take them, though. So this is another one of those factions where I don't think the unit is bad, but they're the ones that I would be, if I was building a list, even though I like the bulls in general, they're probably the least of the things that I'm worried about bringing. I have a feeling what I said there might be might not be taken very well. I'm curious if that's the case. Again, I don't think they're bad. I just think overall, when I look at it, they are of least concern in the army to me personally. But if we're taking, like, say, bad units, I don't think they'd like my list personally. But that's just me. All right, we're on to Sorcerer Kings, my other main army. Until I build up my Yoroni. I currently have my Kitsune. She's downstairs, actually. Because she's gotten various levels of priming. I might do some airbrushing for her clothes. I haven't decided that yet. Right now, I'm airbrushing some proxy Mulith Vortex Beasts. So for Sorcerer Kings, again, I said no characters, and I specifically said no characters because I don't want to cheapen out, because the one character I know is really bad is the Sardar. Sardar, in an army that cares about rituals and spells and magic, he is the everyman standing there. If he was a crazy blender, if he was like the old Kunigir of the past or something like that, or the Blooded, sure. He's not even that. The Maharaj fights better than this guy. So, no. For my choice here, again, can't pick the Train of Art. It's not out yet. I had to pick based off of what we currently have and what I don't see and the reason why I don't see it. And for that, I had to pick Steelheart Djinn. I don't think Steelheart Djinn are bad. Overall, honestly, I truly don't. I think Steelheart Djinn, in a variety of other armies, changing rules that would make it appropriately make sense for them, I think they could do quite well, and I think they could potentially outclass some other things. However, they suffer greatly in this army for a few reasons. One, they are currently outclassed by Ifrit Sword Dancers. Yes, you have that cleave too, but we're no longer lacking for cleaving. We have a variety of monsters. We have the Maharabati Initiates, which I like. They haven't done quite so much for me, but they are somewhat new. When people have had stuff for a while, I don't hear people talk about taking Steelheart. Sword Dancers are, in general, just better for what they do. They do it a little bit cheaper. They do it a lot cheaper per stand because they're only 50 compared to the 70 here. So you can get to bigger amounts if you want cheaper. But I find in this, I take a lot of 3-packs. I don't know if getting that cleave 2 is worth the things that I give up. Like personally, in my list currently, I've been running Windborn instead of my Flamecasters, and I've been enjoying that. I think getting the AP there is very useful compared to this. However, I think just the flat more attacks is helpful. I think the other big issue that they have is that fire is better than air currently. Overall. One, I'm a player who likes to take the Kajukavach, which gets me rerolls depending on what the caster casts, if it was air or fire. I don't do much intermixing currently. Most of these units are either choice, like ghouls or Maharabati, or, more, I would say currently out fire. You're both your big monsters. Out of the 3, separate. But of your monsters, 2 of them are fire-based. You have 2 good fire units. Most of the other stuff can be fire. Your Janor, if you put a character in there, count as your ghouls, your Maharabati. The only thing really locked away are the 2 Djinn, which means I'm more likely to take more fire-based stuff. But Maharaj is going to be my warlord, for sure, because he has the best warlord trait. The Raj technically counts as both, but unless he takes a 40-point upgrade, he's not going in that unit. And he's not going to offer that unit anything anyway for the stuff that he can do, I don't think, really. And my Maharaj, currently, I prefer the fire spells. If I'm taking a lot of bows, maybe the air, but I tend to just run him as fire. More of my units are fire. I'd like to match this. I'd like to be able to heal my units, because if they're born of fire, now I can get them some heals. But he has a damage spell that he wants more fire units for. The other ones I don't care about quite as much. Wreath and Flame can be useful if I'm trying to heal my own units. But when I look at his air spells, okay, lightning, but you gotta then get the extras only if you're touching an air unit. I guess that's the Steelheart if I brought enough of them. Reroll in the volley is nice, but I kind of like the other fire stuff. And the distance, yes, I do like him for air, but I don't think there's enough support. If I take him air, there's a bunch of the stuff that's fire, which is going to be losing some benefits. When I think of rituals, most of the rituals I want to cast are fire. Conflagration, Fire of Dominion, Intrusive Thoughts, all fire. Like all of them. Spiteful Winds, honestly, I don't cast it. Making their charge, March +2 is nice, but then I'm already really, really close. I never find the moment when I want that. Farsight or Saif. Honestly, I just don't cast them. I really don't. I cast mostly fire. It's really Conflagration, Insight Rage, and Intrusive Thoughts. Those are the main things I cast. Is there objectives to destroy? Fire of Dominion. But since those are the 3 that I cast, I'm only going to get an extra bonus if they're fire, which means Steelborn Djinn don't get that bonus. They won't get to chain activate. Now, they're still elemental. So make sure we have this right. They're still elemental. So if I show a fiery dominion, okay, then you go. Now I go again and they show up. Hey, the last card, with them being elemental, as it says here, the last card was a ritual in the draw command step, so they get the extra action, but they're slower. They take that extra bit. Currently, I want the card and then the auto flip next, because that's really where the power comes from. If I just Yeah, oh, you don't get the score this round. Now you go. I've given up tempo quite a bit. It's you don't get the score this round, and now this unit goes. And hey, guess what? They got an extra action. That's a tempo change. And keep in mind the Mahut, if you put the Maharaj on it, now it is fire as well, or air, but say fire. Now it can take the bonuses. So I don't find the space for it. I think sword dancers do just about as good. They don't have the cleave, but they do just about as good. You have very good spots to cleave. That's why I'm taking Ravarna more often than a Boxora. You get a little bit of cleave with your Mahut. You get some trample, you get all that. You got a bit of cleave with your initiates. I don't think they have the support. They are not bad. And I think when the Turn of Arta is out, then we could start maybe making some arguments of, hey, how's a air like list look? Because this thing is shooting, so maybe now my Maharaj, maybe now he wants to be air to get them some rerolls and all that kind of stuff, or maybe take both. I have two because I have one on the little tiny elephant. I just personally I don't take two currently, but maybe I'll change that and give that a shot. Maybe for the next time I try that out, but I just don't think they get the support that they need. So I would say what we have currently, that is the thing that I'm least impressed with. Some of these I have to say was very tough to pick. The next one is not. I know this faction's not out, but I still want to do it. And this is super easy. The choice of Shikigami. Shikigami are terrible. I will be flat out honest. They are awful. They for me, for the moment, might be the worst unit in the game. And that is tough. I'm looking back at some of my other choices. Yeah, they might be. Because I'm looking back as, okay, like Longbowmen. Yeah, but you know what? Their shots aren't bad. The problem is the things around them. It's not necessarily exactly their kit, it's the other things that they have. Wardens aren't great, but I don't know if they're absolute garbage tier. They're pretty down there, but not garbage tier. Nothing in Nords is bad. Personally, I pick Strix, but again, I can find a purpose for Strix. If you told me, hey, you're going to build a list and you got to include six stands of Strix, I will make a list. I won't like every little bit of it, but I'll make you a list that can do okay. I honestly, I do feel that. I think putting in Shikigami, you're actively making yourself worse. They are defense 2, resolve 2, with 4 wounds, 4 attacks, clash 2, mute, which is a useful role, although I'll have it from a few other spots. Fearless, I don't care about being fearless on resolve 2. It's the bad number. You're not really lowering it by much more. The unstoppable, okay, they can get in to do nothing. Can't even put a character in there, and they're not cheap because they're 40 points to stand. When you took a look at like the Damashi, the other main light other than packs of Origami Warriors, and when I did this review, I talked about this. These guys are the same battlefield role, but at least they have impact. So they are, and they have a better resolve. Yeah, they're not fearless, but okay, but you're at least one better, even if it's just something is terrifying one. Now I'm back to the same numbers, and my regiments can look through them. And I could put a character in there if I wanted. I wouldn't, but you still could. So they do a little bit more. When you look at Origami Warriors, you can take 2 stands of Origami Warriors. That's 10 wounds of lethal demise with better defense. We talked about that being the problem that Strix had. Strix are super fast, but they can just be whittled down really quickly. These guys, because that resolves a little bit better, they're more likely that if they're taking the damage, you're taking the primary amount of your damage on your defense, not as much on the resolve. You're only taking essentially about half of what the half that you took previously. Again, maybe not amazing. I don't know if units of Origami Warriors are super great, but I like them better than Shikigami, because Shikigami, for 120 points, don't do anything. In an expensive army where you don't have spare points, this unit is the cost of, again, the Damashi is a little bit more, but they're about that cost. But if you really want to compare apples to apples, take 2 Origami Warriors. I would prefer that. I did that. And you know what? I liked it. Because again, the output of damage isn't good. So at least they have the lethal demise. I said, unlike the Strix had tougher competition there because they're more expensive. You can get cheap things if you just want to fill out stuff. They have really, really good movement, but a few of the other things kind of meh on them for that. But again, even then, Strix are definitely better than um they might be better than Origami Warriors. But cross faction, I don't think that's a fair comparison. But no, Shigami are terrible. So, all right, I'm tired of beating that dead horse. All right, so those are my choices for bottom units. So going back through it very briefly, in case you skipped to the end, for worst units, I should say per faction. I was forcing myself to take them per faction. For Hundred Kingdoms, we went with Longbowmen. We said that although they have some decent shots and all, they don't get enough of them. They're too expensive for what they do, and they're tough to take. You're a restricted slot and only 2 characters, and you have some other decent choices. For Dweghom, we went, we'll go in the order we talked about. Spires, we talked about Strix. For those Strix, we just said that you are a neat trick, but it's the same sort of thing when we talked about for some of the other units. Hey, are you just a trick? Yes. Is it a good trick? I don't know. I think it can be a good trick, but I don't know if it has the support pieces that it needs to really be able to make it happen. It's also sort of thing of when you're moving that fast, you're going to outclass the rest of your army, or I'm going to shoot you off the board. And if you're outclassing the rest of your army, then you're not necessarily getting the sort of things that you want. As soon as you engage, actually, with them, you don't get to work off your reinforcement line anyway, I don't believe. Yeah, they're regular, so you don't get that anyway. So you don't get to push that forward, so that doesn't help. And if you are super far up, all you're going to do is a few wounds. If I happen to be an army that can heal, I'll probably heal it all back before the rest of your army hits me. So we chose Strix for that one. For Dweghom, we went with Wardens. Just very expensive for a stat line that doesn't inspire you and doesn't do better than other similar, or in many cases, cheaper stat lines. You're not defensive enough to call your defense. You're not offensive enough to call yourself offense. And you're devout. It's probably just going to hurt you. For Nords, we ended up going with Ugars. I went back and forth on Fenrir or Ugars. That Fenrirs are just outclassed by Gold Tier, I think. But hey, if you got Fenrirs, you're not going to feel necessarily bad taking them. Ugars, I just think, again, not that they're a bad unit. I don't think Nords really have a bad unit. I don't care what I say. I think Bow-Chosen are good. I'm not saying you have to take Bow-Chosen, but I would never call you an idiot for taking Bow-Chosen ever. I guess unless you're taking like tons of them. But Ugars, you're sitting on defense 2, no evade, very easy to have almost no save. Yeah, you're oblivious, and fearless. You're not going to take tons on that, but you will take it on the front end. So we're going with Ugars, but although, like I said, they're a good army. For Wadhrun, who's Chosen of Death, it's pretty much a consensus with a lot of players that I see that when you look at all the choices in here, they just don't do enough compared to the other bits of the army for both their points, for their slot choice, for their taking up the restricted slot of your Scion of Conquest. So it's only one guy who can take them, and he's got some better choices. The Old Dominion out with Mori. I went back and forth between them and Assassins, but I said, you know what? For what I want for my light unit in that army, in the various ways I played that army, I want my light unit getting into someone's face. They're not going to outclass so far like the Strix would. So the rest of my army can be pulling up. And even if they do, in that army, I actually do want to delay you because I need to get more stuff in. Effectively, I'm not worried necessarily about speed. But for that one, Mori need time to develop, and I don't want to give them that time. Assassins, though not great, can at least get them the job that I want Mori to do, and they can do it earlier. So I'm giving it to them. I think that maybe is one of the more controversial picks. For City States, I gave it to the Hapsis unit. Auxiliaries, absolutely great, but as a unit, I just think there's things that can defend a little bit better than they defend. I think there's things that attack a little bit better than they attack, and for the points that you're putting, I'd rather just take them separately in my units of, say, Hoplites, or if I want to take those sort of points, I'm taking Inquisitors, or Thyrians, or Clockworks, or something else like that. For Sorcerer Kings, we went with Steelborn Jinn. hey, cleave 2 is nice when you're sitting on 4 attacks and you're mostly a fire army. Having air can be a detriment. I don't really want to take more currently than about 1 or so air units, and that's probably going to be bows instead of close combat. And for Yoroni, we talked about how it's Shikigami. Nothing more needs to be said. They have no rules. All they have is points. All right, so in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this. Do try to keep it civil. I don't remove comments, and I don't expect this to cause any like overly antagonistic comments. But obviously, keep it friendly, stuff like that. If you disagree, please just say so. I have no problem with that. But like nothing, no name calling, that kind of stuff, kind of things. We don't really see that much. You don't really see that much on stuff like this on YouTube, but you do see it on some of the other spots. I do watch and see what some people there say. But for any of these, I said for some of these, I would not put them as bad units overall in the game. But I made myself pick something for every army, and I made myself make that decision based off of what I saw. So a lot of this discussion, like we said, boils down to where do they fit? Do they do their role where no one else does it as well or the same way? Are they fair for their points? Do you see them? Do you hear them talked about? So all those sort of things went into it. So, like I said, maybe Strix aren't bad. I don't hear anyone talking about them personally, at least where I am. So, not that I let that necessarily color my view, but if I have this sort of thought they might be the bottom, oh, am I missing the trick? I don't think I am. Like I said, Haspis, I think Haspis you see a lot of because they're in the initial box. And I think as auxiliary, absolutely great. But for other stuff, I'd probably just take other units, especially now that you have your full line. Your current full line, I should say. So, all right, hopefully that was of interest. As always, let me know other things that you might want to see. I did bottom. I now actually want to do top as well. I haven't started thinking about that whatsoever. I have some thoughts of what I might pick for some of these. But again, I think that's also very up in the air. And for any of these choices, do realize as well, even though I try to be reasonably impartial on my thoughts on this, it also is a product of what you see, what you think, the way that I would play. If something really doesn't fit the thoughts that I have, that's automatically going to knock them down a little bit. It won't make them necessarily bad, but it will change a little bit of those thoughts. So just something to keep in mind with all of that. All right, well, keep in mind if you do want anything for Conquest, we do have a discount code in the show notes. It's Train Kickers, saves you 10%, helps out the show as well. For other things coming up, I do want to do a best of. Like I said, I have a tournament later this month, so I'm going to do some battle reports out of that. At least picture based. I don't think I'm going to do full recording, but maybe I'll talk to him, see if I do that. Once Yoroni are out, we want to record some stuff of that. Steve and I have been trying to get together for some games. The problem is our two schedules, they don't align the way we'd want. He's good on like Mondays, but the problem with that is I live in the opposite direction from the place that he's near, and I'm done much earlier. So I either hang out at my job for 4 hours, hang out up there for quite a while. I guess not a bad idea. Maybe I can try to arrange some other games, but it just hasn't worked out. So we are working on that. We do want to go through that, but I said it was going to happen. I do apologize for it being more delayed than we thought. It's been tougher to make it work than we want. And as always, I would like to get back to some more regular recording, but the other two guys, just their schedules don't match for each other. So maybe I'll try to just do some more individual stuff with them. But I've been doing a lot of my own individual stuff because I can just record whenever. Like right now, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. So, all right. Yep, I think that does it for everyone, everything here. So, on behalf of everyone at the show, then, have some good hobbying and some great gaming.